All right, it's really nuts to think that I've racked over 10,000 shots on my Fuji X100VI in literally under 2 months. I got this camera on August 14th of this year, and it's been a crazy journey. So literally in that 2 months, I've taken this camera to Austin, Texas, to Chinatown in DC, all the way out to the mountains in Virginia. Now that the honeymoon phase is coming to an end, let me give you guys my thoughts and opinions on this camera and what my experience has been in those 10,000 shots, and is it worth buying this camera? So quick backstory on my journey. The camera that I was using primarily prior to picking up my Fuji X100VI was my Sony a7 IV. So I got the Sony a7 IV in September of 2023, and I just checked the shutter count for this video. I have 43,339 shots on my Sony a7 IV. Like I said, I got that camera in 2023 of September, and I got my Fuji literally less than 2 months ago, and I freaking have 10,000 shots. So getting the Fuji, it's really helped me see photography in a new light. Since I really just started carrying this camera everywhere with me, I wanted a camera that was small, but packed a punch. And this Fuji definitely hits both of those marks in my experience. You know, being so small, being so portable, its size, really allows you to take this camera pretty much everywhere with you, which I pretty much do. When I take my Fuji with me, when I take it out with me, it's more just play, it's more just fun. You know, I don't take it as seriously as I did when I took my a7 IV with me everywhere. So I just started to treat it as documenting my life. You know, really just capturing the small moments, capturing the behind the scenes of my life. Everybody, we all live unique lives. We are all one of ones. And I just wanted to document this life that I live. So I wanted a camera that was pretty small, that was pretty portable, that packed the really good specs, which we will get into here shortly. So if you aren't familiar with this camera, it is a fixed 35mm equivalent. 35mm is not too wide, but it's not too tight. It's literally right in that middle ground. And there has been situations where I wish I would have had a little wider, say like a 28mm equivalent lens. But 35, I find, allows you to just really capture pretty much anything. Like either you want to try to go for like a portrait close up, or you can kind of get more establishing wider shots. 35 is like the Swiss Army knife of focal lengths. It's pretty versatile in many situations. Now, I do know that Fuji does have the teleconverters and then the wide angle converter, whatever. I probably will pick that up, but not right now. I've just been using this camera pretty much as it is. And being stuck at one focal length, a lot of people would say that's kind of like a con. I look at it both sides. Obviously, there's pros, there's cons. The cons, you are stuck with one focal length. You can't change your focal length. They do have the digital zoom with this camera, but I find I don't really use that. If I want to zoom, I'll just crop in on my image a little bit. I always try to get it straight out of camera, just nail the shot straight out of camera without having to crop and post. That's how I've been shooting this camera. Forgot to light the candle, guys, my bad. We gotta make it smell nice and good in here. I know y'all can smell that. That's a midnight suede camera. I said camera, candle. Back to this camera. Yeah, you're stuck with one focal length. That really allows you to be more creative, in my opinion. You know, coming from my a7 IV, I pretty much only in my photography journey shot with zoom lenses. So here's some zoom lenses. If you're not familiar, you can zoom and change your focal length wherever you're at. So coming from zoom lenses to just a fixed lens, it changed my view on photography. You know, you have to really work your shot. You have to really zoom with your feet is what I like to say. You know, you got to move and be just more interactive with whenever you're shooting. I've said in previous videos, when you're using a zoom lens, it's like camping. Like you can sit back and just zoom in a little bit. Whereas this, you really got to interact with your shots. I've found myself literally chasing after cars at Cars and Coffee and trying to get that angle and get everything in frame the way I want. Whereas with the zoom, you can just zoom. So like, I like it better. Some people may disagree, to each their own. Now, some of the specs this camera packs, I can tell you, this thing packs a punch. It has a 40 megapixel sensor. The VI or the 6 has IBIS. They introduced IBIS this year. Image stabilization, which we will definitely be covering a little bit later. It has a built-in flash, which I absolutely love. I didn't know how much I'd love having a built-in flash in the camera. It just helps with getting and capturing moments that you might have missed because you don't have enough light. And then it also gives me that like disposable camera look. You know, back in the day, you could go to Walmart. I mean, you can still do it right now. But you know, you go pick up these little disposable cameras for fun, and you know, you're shooting on film, and it just has that look. Whenever I use the flash on this camera, it has that look that I'm going for, that I like, and it kind of just looks timeless. That's what I really like about shooting with this little flash on it. It's not the brightest flash, but it's better to have a flash than not have a flash on you. And then lastly, that can't be overstated, is obviously the size, the compactness. You know, it's kind of an inconspicuous little camera. Whereas if you pull out like the big A7 IV or like a bigger DSLR body, most modern cameras are kind of big. So this thing, really small, inconspicuous. If you're taking pictures of people, most people, they don't really care. Like, even if it's your family or friends, I feel more people are just kind of more relaxed. Whereas if I use my other camera, my bigger camera, people tend to just get awkward. Like it's human nature. It's kind of weird, you know, whenever people are taking pictures of you. This one, I don't really get that vibe as much. You know, I can be out with my friends and I'm literally just taking pictures of them and they don't care. So that can't be overstated. Like it's hard to measure that on paper when it comes to, you know, a spec sheet, if you will. And then having your controls, you know, if you're a photographer or you're an aspiring photographer, this camera is great for literally anybody from a novice to a freaking expert, because you have all your controls. You have, you know, customizable dials front and back where you can control your shutter speed, your ISO, and then you have an aperture dial built on the lens. So like they thought of it all, you know, they thought definitely photographers in mind first and built the camera around that. So having all your controls, you know, allows you to really engage with the process of photography. It's fun, you know, it's fun to really just, it makes you just take your time more, I would say. Whereas like if you're coming from like an iPhone, you just press a button. This, you know, you gotta be more intentional. You gotta think about what every control does. And some people, they, you know, I showed my brother this camera, he picked it up and he was like, bro, what do all these controls do? You know, it's a learning curve. Like, it's like anything you practice, you'll get better and it'll become second nature. It's like riding a bike, literally. You know, once you learn it, once you get over that hurdle, it's second nature. You know, you don't even think about it when you're dialing your settings really quick. But I do shoot this camera in aperture priority mode. I made a video on that recently. Definitely go check that out after this. That's how I shoot this camera 95% of the time. Because what I treat this camera as, like I said, I just like to document my life. And aperture priority mode allows me to just stay in the moment, to not have to worry as much about camera settings. Unless I'm trying to go for like a creative shot. My Chinatown shot where it was like the motion blur, or recently when I went out to the mountains in Virginia, if I want the waterfall to be, you know, look silky smooth, that's when I was switching to full manual. But if I'm just out having fun, snapping, I'm shooting aperture priority. All you do is control your aperture and the camera does the rest after you program it. So check out that video if you're interested. 10,000 shots. What I've learned in that time is it goes beyond a spec sheet. You know, there's almost your iPhone is a phenomenal camera. And I recently just got the new iPhone, the 16. I was coming from the 13. I was like, yeah, it's time to upgrade. Camera's phenomenal on it. And I do want to play around with that camera a little bit more. But one thing that can't be measured is pickup ability. This, I gotta admit, guys, it's a pretty attractive looking little camera. So, you know, it just being out on my desk, just having this camera with me, slung around me. Sometimes I don't even really use it much at all during the day, but I always have it with me. Like the pickup ability factor of this camera cannot be overstated. It is one of the most pickupable cameras I've ever owned, if that makes sense. Like all the cameras I have the Sony a7 IV, I have a Nikon D5600 and then another Nikon. This camera by far is the one I pick up the most. It's the one that I want to pick up if I'm going out to go take photos. There's something about it. Like it's such a nice little package they put together here, and it takes phenomenal photos. Like it's a win-win in my books. You know, you can't change the lenses. Yes, that might be a con, but I try to look at it in terms of get more creative. Now, the one thing Fuji definitely needs to go ahead and overhaul about this camera, and I hear about all their other cameras. This is my first Fuji, so this is my first time using a Fuji, and their menu system, it is abysmal. Like, they need to rehaul that menu system. So Fuji, if you're listening, spend some time, spend some money, research and develop a better freaking menu system, because it's a little confusing, especially if I can only imagine, you know, if you're a beginner in photography and then you open that menu system, it's a mess. So they definitely need to clean that up, clean shop. The good thing about that is once you get it set up the way you like, you rarely go in your menus, but it's still, you know, something they should definitely do a little bit better with their next line of cameras, or even just a software update. Like, let's make that menu a little better, guys. However, when you dig through the menus, this is another huge thing about this camera that makes Fuji. I've pretty much only used this camera's JPEGs. Let me explain. So with Fuji, they're in an interesting position. They make camera bodies, they make camera lenses, and they make film. So Fujifilm produces its own film stock. They hired, long story short, they hired a bunch of color scientists and people in that world to emulate those films that they produce and basically make them digital. So you can use what's called a film simulation on this camera. It has like 20 film looks, or you can go down the rabbit hole, which most people do when you buy this camera, and create your own film recipe. There's literally a website, Fuji X Weekly. I love this website. Go on there and find hundreds of different film looks. Like I said, I use primarily just the JPEG straight out of camera. I do shoot RAW plus JPEG, but most of the times I'm just using the JPEG straight out of camera. So if you're on Instagram, you ever see SOOC, that means straight out of camera. That photographer literally took the picture straight from the camera and put it on Instagram or whatever it is. So that's what SOOC. I was always wondering, what does SOOC mean? But I figured it out. So yeah, like not having to spend much time in Lightroom, which I use. They have different editing softwares, but Lightroom's the biggest one. Not having to spend much time in Lightroom, tweaking your colors, editing this, doing this, and being able to just get the image straight out of camera is game changer. It really is game changer in the sense that I don't spend much time editing these photos anymore, and it makes me more in the moment. And then also on top of that, when you do use your film recipe, okay, so the overlay that you see, the colors that you see straight out of the screen right here is the film recipe that I used. And I made a whole video on the film recipes I love the most. But long story short, you can literally get different looks. The colors that you can achieve with this camera, I would say, are better than my Sony. Now, granted, I need to spend more time in Lightroom and really go down that rabbit hole. And especially this just being I would say a documentary camera, not having to edit, guys, it's like just a huge leg up. It's so much of a time saver in my opinion. If you do want to edit, you can still edit because you can shoot in RAW plus JPEG. So RAW, it captures the raw data, and then you can go in there and throw your own preset or tweak your colors as you will. But most of the times I'm just shooting this straight out of camera, and that cannot be overstated. So in those 10,000 shots, I would say the size of this camera, being able to shoot straight out of camera, having your just full control of a camera, you know, all your dials, everything you need to actually craft an image. This is a very compelling package. Yes, it does cost a premium price, and a lot of the times they're sold out, or you might have to pay a little bit more, but I gotta admit, I love this camera. It is one that I'm definitely gonna keep, and one that got me to go down the rabbit hole of the rangefinder style cameras. So this camera is a rangefinder. So you can shoot this camera rangefinder style, where you're looking through this optical view of the real world in front of you, no screens, and you're seeing the world as it is, and you can still, you know, be engaged with your world and take photos. It's kind of like a Leica, if you guys are familiar, the M series. So this kind of got me down the rabbit hole of that. And the one camera I am very excited for, and I hope Fuji makes this camera, is the X Pro 4. That's definitely on my list. If that camera comes out, your boy is probably gonna be buying that. So definitely be on the lookout. Basically, think of the X Pro series similar to this, rangefinder style, but you can swap lenses. So that is pretty interesting stuff. So I'll definitely be checking that camera out if it does drop. We'll see. Video on this camera. This camera does shoot video, and like I mentioned earlier in the video, I said it has IBIS, so image stabilization, in-body image stabilization. So the previous version did not have IBIS. This version does have IBIS, and that kind of goes both ways in the sense that for images, if you have IBIS, you can really crank your shutter speed really low. So I've had exposure times of 1 second, literally 1 second. My waterfall shots recently, those were like half a second to 1 second each. And you literally just hold the camera as still as you can, and the IBIS corrects for those small little micro jitters, and it corrects for that. So it applies that to video as well. You know, this camera, the previous version of this camera did not have IBIS, like I said, and the video is kind of useless. If you don't have IBIS for video, unless you're using like a gimbal or something, then your video can be very jittery and kind of all over the place. It's just not really usable. It doesn't look good. But if you're relatively still and you turn on IBIS and you're recording video, which this little camera is capable of video, like it shoots in 6.2K, caveat, that does have a 1.23 times crop, but the video is very capable. And then being able to shoot an F-Log too, that's basically like shooting raw for, you know, your images. You're able to tweak your colors in post when you edit your videos. So this little thing packs a punch. Like all around, just packs a punch. So not only being really good with taking photos, but also being very capable in the video department as well. It's just a win-win, especially the day and age we live in. Obviously video, you go on anywhere, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, what you're watching on, videos everywhere. It's here to stay. I don't treat this camera as like a video camera at all. You know, I treat it more, definitely predominantly, I'm using this for photography, just taking photos. But if I do want that just quick little 10-second, that's kind of what I'm doing, little snippets, I will put it in video and just pan real slow, just to see where I'm at. That's where I find this camera excels really, really good. And, you know, if I want to get just some quick little B-roll of life is what I call it. This camera does that very well, and I love it. I love it for that. Now, a couple accessories in that 10,000 shots I've gotten my hands on for this camera. Couple things. The thumb grip, highly recommend getting the thumb grip. That just helps with holding the camera, in my opinion. My hands aren't the largest, they're not the smallest, I'm like medium size. So having just a better grip on the camera, you want to have a better grip on the camera. So I recommend checking out the thumb grip. And with that thumb grip, the small rig one, it comes with a shutter release button, so that red button. I love this button, it feels really good. And whenever I give this camera to somebody and they're like, well, how do I use this? I say, press the big red button. And it solves the problem. People see a big red button. And then lastly, the last accessory that I use and highly recommend is, unfortunately, Fuji, they don't ship this camera fully weather sealed. So you're not able to like go underwater with this, but you can go out in like light rain. But in order to do that, you need to have this filter protect your lens element and, you know, all the lens electronics up front. So I use the NISI, N-I-S-I, I believe it is, NISI, whatever it is. I'll leave it in the description, but I definitely recommend getting this accessory as well. And it protects your like lens element. It's like a filter on the top. So, you know, if you're like me, I don't put on lens caps because that's just one thing to remember. Oh shit, I missed my shot, gotta get my lens cap off. So I recommend just getting a lens cover like this. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then if you're ever wondering what these little things are, these are These are Peak Design anchors, and it allows you to use either the wrist strap, or you can use the neck strap. It's just a very quick and easy way to attach those accessories. So I recommend looking into the Peak Design ecosystem. I might do a video about it, we'll see. But yeah, 10,000 shots with this camera, and I gotta admit, it's turning into one of my favorite cameras in recent times. So all in all, yes, the hype, there's a lot of hype around this camera, but I think it is for good reason. They pack a lot of punch, with this little package right here. Like I said earlier, yes, it is a premium price, but I look at it as you get what you pay for, and this is no slouch. And if you compare it to what else is being offered on the market, I think this is a very compelling package right here, and they did a pretty good job. So if you want to see more images I'm capturing with this camera, definitely go check in on my Instagram. I post all my newest work, and most of my newest work, I want to say up until August when I got this camera, I've been shooting exclusively on this camera when it comes to photography, unless it's like a paid gig or something. In terms of just documenting my everyday life and going hiking, going out with friends, I'm using this camera, and I'm using this camera to do that. And I love this little camera. It's a phenomenal little package. And I pretty much always post my newest work to my Instagram first. So if you want to stay up to date on my newest work, go check out my Instagram. And lastly, if you guys made it this far, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you tuning in. I love this camera. It's just pushing me to go out and explore more. So I got some surprises for you guys coming very soon. We got a pretty big epic trip coming up that I'm going to be taking this camera with me and documenting what I see. So stay tuned. I appreciate you guys, and be on the lookout. I'll be dropping more details about that trip here soon. Just want to finish off a few little odds and ends things. But yeah, with that being said, hopefully you guys like this video, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.